The storm came without mercy, rolling over the plains like a living wall of darkness. The sky turned the color of old iron, and the wind howled low and deep, bending grass flat against the earth. Thunder cracked so close it rattled bones. On nights like this, even the strongest men prayed quietly. And on that night, a rich rancher named Thomas Callahan believed he was about to lose everything he had built in a lifetime. Thomas stood on the wide porch of his ranch house, coat pulled tight, eyes fixed on the distant pastures. Somewhere out there were more than 2,000 head of cattle, his pride, his fortune, his legacy. The weather report had warned of heavy rain, but this was no ordinary storm. This was a monster. Fences would fall. Creeks would flood. Cattle could panic, scatter, drown, or be struck by lightning. He barked orders to his ranch hands, but even they knew there was only so much human effort could do against nature's fury. Thomas was a man used to control. He controlled land, money, people, outcomes. He had grown from a poor farm boy into one of the wealthiest ranchers in the region, but success had hardened him. He trusted numbers more than people, contracts more than kindness. Miracles were for church sermons, not real life. Or so he believed. Miles away, on the edge of the same storm, a young woman named Emily Harper was struggling just to stay upright against the wind. Her coat was thin, her boots worn, but her eyes were sharp and steady. She lived alone in a small cabin near the old river bend, land no one else wanted. She survived by helping neighboring farms, mending fences, caring for animals, doing work others overlooked. She had little money, but she understood cattle better than most men twice her age. She could read their fear, anticipate their movement, sense when panic was about to explode into disaster. When the first wave of rain hit, Emily felt it in her bones. She knew this storm was dangerous. Her first thought wasn't for her cabin or her own safety, it was for the animals. She remembered the low-lying pasture on Callahan Ranch, the one near the river that flooded fast. Thousands of cattle, trapped between rising water and broken fencing, could mean death on a massive scale. She didn't work for Thomas Callahan. In fact, he barely knew she existed. But she knew his land. And she knew time was running out. Without hesitation, Emily saddled her horse and rode straight into the storm. The rain stung like needles. Lightning split the sky, revealing cattle already restless, bunched too tight, their eyes wide with terror. The river had begun to rise, brown and angry, swallowing ground inch by inch. Emily didn't panic. She rode the perimeter, shouting, whistling, using her body and her horse to guide the herd away from the danger. She cut through fallen branches, forced open a half-broken gate, and redirected the cattle toward higher ground most ranchers had forgotten existed. The cattle resisted at first. Fear makes animals stubborn. But Emily stayed calm. She moved slowly, deliberately, using pressure and release, the language cattle understood better than force. Hours passed. Her clothes were soaked, her hands numb, her muscles screaming. At one point, a flash flood swept so close it nearly pulled her horse off its feet. Still, she kept going. At the ranch house, Thomas received grim reports. One fence was down. Another pasture was flooding. He mounted his horse and rode out himself, heart pounding with a feeling he hated, helplessness. But when he reached the low pasture, he froze. The cattle were gone. Not scattered. Not drowned. Gone. Panic surged through him as he followed the trail. Then, through the rain and darkness, he saw it, his entire herd moving steadily toward high ground, controlled, alive. And at the front, silhouetted against lightning, was a lone rider. Thomas rode closer, disbelief mixing with awe. He watched as Emily worked, soaked to the bone, directing thousands of cattle with precision and calm he had rarely seen even in seasoned foremen. She didn't notice him at first. She was focused on the animals, on keeping them safe, on finishing what she had started. When the last of the cattle reached safety and the storm began to ease, Emily finally noticed Thomas. Mud-streaked, exhausted, she slid off her horse. Thomas dismounted too, staring at her as if she'd stepped out of a legend. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice nearly lost in the wind. "Emily," she replied simply. "I live by the river." "You saved my cattle," he said slowly, as if saying it aloud might make it real. "I just moved them," she answered. "They would have drowned down there." Thomas looked out at the living sea of cattle, breathing, shifting, alive. The value of what she had done was staggering: millions of dollars saved, years of work preserved. But it wasn't the money that shook him. It was the way she had done it. Alone. Without being asked. Without expecting anything. "You risked your life," he said. She shrugged, wincing as the adrenaline faded. They needed help. In that moment, something cracked inside Thomas Callahan. A belief he had carried for decades, that people only acted out of self-interest, collapsed under the weight of what he had witnessed. He had seen skill before. He had seen bravery. But this felt different. It felt like grace. Word spread quickly. By morning, ranch hands whispered about the woman who rode into the storm and saved the herd. Some called her fearless. Others called her reckless. Thomas called her back to the ranch house and offered her money, more than she had ever seen. Emily shook her head. "I don't need that much," she said quietly. "Just enough to fix my roof and buy winter feed for my horse." Thomas stared at her, stunned again. Anyone else would have negotiated, demanded more, seen opportunity. Emily saw only needs, not greed. "Come work for me," he said finally. "Name your position. Your pay." She considered it. "I'll work with the cattle," she said. "And I don't want an office. I want to be out there." From that day on, Emily became an essential part of the ranch. She improved herd movement, reduced losses, trained hands to work smarter, not harder. Profits rose, but more importantly, the ranch felt different. Calmer. More humane. Thomas found himself listening to her, to his workers, to instincts he had long ignored. People began to say she was a miracle. Thomas hated the word, but he couldn't deny the change she had brought, not just to his ranch, but to him. He visited the pastures more. He learned names. He remembered what it felt like to care more about life than ledgers. One evening, months later, Thomas and Emily stood watching the sunset bleed gold across the plains. The cattle grazed peacefully, safe and strong. "I used to think miracles were fairy tales," Thomas said. "But that night, I don't know what else to call it." Emily smiled softly. "Miracles aren't magic," she said. "They're just people choosing to act when it matters." Thomas nodded, knowing she was right. The storm that nearly destroyed him had instead given him something far more valuable than money or cattle. It had given him perspective. And it had brought into his life a woman who reminded him that sometimes salvation arrives quietly, on horseback, riding straight into the rain.